Ronel? Ronel, ibalik na ito yung ako na pinapakabalik. Hindi na yan ang same siyam. Ang sapatin sa wala. Diesel na iya. Nang ginapatu.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our day 3 of the Redoom Retreat. We will begin shortly. For the moment, we invite you to respond to the guide questions flashed on screen. And once you are done, we invite you also to read what others are sharing in the chat box. Once again, when you're done answering the reflection questions flashed on screen, you may read the answers of the others as shared on the chat box. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. This is Father Sig Olin of the Center for Ignatian Spirituality, CIS. Welcome to the third and final day of our online Holy Week retreat. We hope that the retreat points shared by our Jesuit speakers have stirred something in you, spoken to you of God's hopes and desires for you, and led you to deeper listening and prayer. We have journeyed together with Jesus in the heartbreak of Holy Thursday when he spends his final intimate moments with his friends, and through the pain and suffering of Good Friday when he carries the cross and dies on Calvary in his act of total self giving. Good Friday calls us to unite our own pains and sufferings with the Lord. By his life and by his death, our Lord teaches us not to run away from our struggles and our sorrows, for these struggles and sorrows can be redemptive too and life giving for ourselves and for others. Today we embrace the somber mood of Black Saturday. We contemplate Jesus lifeless in the tomb. We enter into the grief and gloom of this day. We stay in its almost tangible silence. We let this silence speak to us, fill us, even comfort us. In the lifelessness of Black Saturday, we look for what is life giving. We all experience our own Black Saturdays. At times, we just need to immerse ourselves in and relish silence. At times, we just need to be still, to be empty, to be unoccupied. At other times, we just need to go through grief and mourn our loss and get in touch with what is absent in our lives. Our Black Saturday experiences reveal to us the quiet yet constant workings of God's grace. They teach us to hope and to desire, to seek and strive for what truly matters, what truly lasts, what truly gives us life. As we ponder Black Saturday and look forward to the joy and hope of Easter Sunday, we bring before the Lord in prayer. loved ones, and other individuals, communities, and nations we know that are going through times of darkness and despair, uncertainty, and grief. We hold in our hearts the people of Myanmar, Ukraine, Russia. We lift up to the Lord our own nation as well in these most difficult times. This online retreat is free. Any donations you wish to give are most welcome. These donations will be used for our ministry and outreach. Many among our poor communities hunger for spiritual nourishment and accompaniment. Your support will help us at CAS Philippines to respond to these needs. We will flash on the screen the details on ways to send your donation. Our Jesuit speaker for today is Father Jordan Orbe, a psychotherapist by training and a licensed psychologist. Father Jordan is the executive director of the Mayo Center for Psychospiritual Formation. He also teaches in the Department of Psychology of the Ateneo de Manila.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for day 3 of this Holy Triduum retreat. Before we proceed with the reflection points, let us take a few moments to prepare ourselves and once again enter sacred space. Today is Holy Saturday. Perhaps after the poignant Last Supper scene of Holy Thursday, followed by the painful and heartrending crucifixion of Good Friday, you feel that you cannot wait to end this heaviness and move to Easter. We human beings have a natural aversion to pain, to suffering and death. And we would rather avert our eyes and turn our backs to these difficult realities. But there is wisdom in not rushing and allowing this in-between time to teach us. We are naturally wired for activity. We resist being passive. We want to be in control, to call the shots. We are so used to noise and busyness. We want to fill what is empty or make up for what is absent. This time between Good Friday and Easter Sunday is a deeply meaningful time and is meant to be quiet time. This is the natural order of things. There is ebb and flow, and the silence between notes of a piece of music is just as important as the notes themselves. So perhaps we can really take this time and make space for whatever comes up for us. There's always so much to do, so many things to fix, so much to worry about. Perhaps many of us are afraid that if we do not do anything, if we're not doing, then we will fail. But face to face with what happened on Good Friday, we realize that this is something that we cannot control or fix. We just have to let it unfold. Many times in my work, I encounter a lot of people who experience a lot of unhappiness and distress. And one major source of all of this is really the compulsion for activity. And there is difficulty with emptiness. So maybe the invitation for us really is to stop, to take a few breaths here and make space. And I would like to share this thought from a Buddhist nun. Perhaps you've heard me quote her several times in different settings, but I like this writer very much. Her name is Pema Chodron, and she says something about how we are invited to stay with that shakiness, to stay with a broken heart, with a rumbling stomach. with the feelings of hopelessness and wanting to get revenge. And she says that that is the path of true awakening. Sticking without uncertainty, getting the knack of relaxing in the midst of chaos, learning not to panic. This is the spiritual path. So, my dear friends, we are invited to walk this spiritual path year after year during this Holy Triduum. And during this time, we are just invited to stay with whatever it is that comes up for us during this time, to stay with the discomfort, to stay with the loneliness, to stay with the lack of control. And so, before we enter the jubilation of Easter, let us just pause and make space and attend to what we are called to notice during this time. For our reflection today, let us consider the Easter account from the Gospel of Luke. At daybreak on the first day of the week, the women who had come from Galilee with Jesus took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were puzzling over this, behold, two men in dazzling garments appeared to them. They were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. They said to them, "Why do you seek the living one among the dead? He is not here, but he has been raised. Remember what he said to you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified and rise on the third day." And they remembered his words. Then they returned from the tomb and announced all these things to the 11 and to all the others. The empty tomb. The empty tomb as the Easter moment. It is important to note that the Easter moment, this moment of resurrection, is not at all clearly depicted in the scriptures. We have detailed accounts of Jesus' birth, various miracles, Jesus walking on the water. Even the transfiguration is told in such a vivid way. The crucifixion, of course, as we have just recently encountered once again, is also vividly recounted. However, we don't really have an account of how the resurrection took place. Did Jesus just wake up as if he were asleep? Was there any event? I remember seeing this video of an Easter celebration. I don't know where it was, maybe Vietnam or something. And they were in the church, and there was a cave in the sanctuary. I think it was made of paper mache or something like that. And as they were singing the Gloria, the stone split in two, and a statue of Jesus emerges from the cave with smoke and fireworks and special effects, while the choir sings majestically. So I'm sure for the people who were in that celebration, it was such a glorious sight. But this cinematic version of the scene is nowhere in scriptures. What we have instead is an empty tomb and a proclamation from perhaps angels. And there is something about this that is deeply profound, something that holds deep meaning for all of us. There's something here that we need to reflect on again and again. The great mystery of Easter, Jesus' resurrection from the dead, does not begin with trumpets blazing, fireworks, and alleluias, but it begins in darkness, with silence and emptiness. There's both a psychological and spiritual invitation here for all of us, especially those of us who are experiencing some grief and sadness. These past 2 years of the pandemic, they have been a time of tremendous loss for the entire world. Many have lost loved ones, dearly beloved, family, and friends. We have lost many aspects of our life. We have lost the sense of security, predictability, and comfort. So perhaps it is appropriate that we allow the empty tomb to be the starting point of our Easter celebration. And we will also start with this as our point of reflection this morning. Let us allow the empty tomb to open us up to the invitations of Easter. And following the gospel account, I propose 4 movements which we can consider also as 4 invitations into Easter. Approach the place of pain. Accept emptiness. Attend to what is alive. Announce hope. So the first invitation, approach the place of pain. The Easter story did not start with an appearance of Jesus, but rather it begins with the women going to the tomb. Come to think about it, if the women did not go to the tomb, would they have learned of Jesus' rising? Acknowledging the loss of someone or something that we love means that we approach and face the reality of the loss. It is a very human thing for us to want to avoid the pain. There's something about the human condition that makes us want to get rid of anything that reminds us of something that is hurtful to us. Our minds and our psyches have a natural way of shielding us from pain. There is something protective and adaptive and even instinctive about this tendency to avoid pain. But dear friends, not all pain must be avoided. In life, there is a difference between clean pain and dirty pain. Perhaps some of you have heard me already talk about this, and this is something that useful for me personally, and I share this with everyone every chance I get, because the distinction is really just helpful. Clean pain is unavoidable. Clean pain comes from hurtful events and painful realities of life that happen without our intention or control. That's just part of life. We experience pain. And perhaps the most difficult pain of all is death in its varied forms. Death is a reality that causes us a lot of pain. But death is somehow part of life. It is a realistic pain and even an inevitable pain. Dirty pain, on the other hand, is optional. Dirty pain comes from our denial of reality and our inability to accept. And avoidance is one sign that we are stuck on dirty pain. And so, dear friends, perhaps we can think about those distinctions, that there is a difference between pain that happens without us being able to fully control or avoid it. And there's also pain that we don't really need. And this is the pain that is optional, the pain that comes from our judgment, the pain that comes from our denial, the pain that comes from our rejection of reality. And so, this invitation to approach the place of pain really comes from a certain wisdom. And this wisdom that leads to healing asks us to acknowledge and approach this place of pain. However, it is important to remember to approach with gentleness, with kindness, and perhaps to do this with trusted companions. The invitation of Easter and of the whole Paschal Triduum is not to avoid or escape pain, but to approach it and to acknowledge it. Even Jesus, in his post-resurrection appearances, he still bore the wounds of his passion and death. And the message of this for all of us is that new life takes into itself our old self and our old wounds and somehow transforms it. That our old self and our old wounds are not exactly erased or eliminated or forgotten, but they are included and integrated. And as they are integrated, they are transformed. And so the first step in this transformation is this approaching our wounds, approaching our areas of pain in our life. Avoidance, denial, and rejection of these painful areas will only prevent that transformation from taking place. And so perhaps here we can pause and ask, how does avoidance manifest in our life? How do we avoid these areas of pain? How have we overcome this tendency to avoid approaching the unpleasant and painful areas of life? Perhaps this is something that you have already done or you already do time and again in your life, that you're able to overcome this tendency to avoid. And perhaps we can also listen and pay attention to how God is inviting you to approach these areas together with Him. So let us pause here for a few minutes and reflect on these. The second invitation of the empty tomb is accept the emptiness. When the women arrived in the tomb, they found it empty. It must have been both shocking and heartbreaking for them. And as we reflect on this, perhaps we can enter into that experience and sense this invitation to accept this emptiness. For many of us, emptiness is scary. Emptiness is intimidating. We experience what art experts call horror vacui or kinophobia, which is a fear of empty space. In our day-to-day lives, we often rush to fill up what is vacant or silent. I remember inviting a group of community nanays, mothers from one of our apostolate areas. And so we invited them to our novitiate in Novaliches for a short silent retreat. And if you've ever visited Sacred Heart Novitiate, you know that there is some kind of hush in that place. In the middle of a busy part of Quezon City, you have this oasis of trees and silence. However, the group I brought found this rather disconcerting and sad. Silence is completely alien to them. And so when they experienced that, they felt that it was very, very unfamiliar and strange. And perhaps we experience something like that in our modern life. We are so used to activity. We are so used to all of these stimuli. When we get bored, we often reach for our smartphones to scroll through our newsfeed. And we need constant stimulation with all sorts of content. And the danger here is we lose touch with the infinite value that emptiness offers. One essential characteristic of the spiritual life is the constant cycle of emptying. If you have journeyed in your spiritual growth for some time, you know this very well. It is a constant cycle of emptying, of being filled up and then emptying, of being filled up again and being emptied again. And it seems that one guideline in spiritual life is that one must be emptied in order for one to be filled. And perhaps this is what this part of our Easter reflection really invites us to enter. We are invited to locate and regard our own emptiness. And perhaps you can ask yourself, what are these areas of emptiness in my life? Very obvious, perhaps, would be a loss of a loved one, or an experience of fear, of uncertainty, of hardship, an experience of disappointment, or the emptiness of a lack of direction. Could it be the emptiness of helplessness and lack of control? Or the emptiness of old age or chronic illness? Perhaps as we go through these days of the Paschal Mystery, we are invited to be present to this emptiness. not to deny it, not to fill it up. Dear friends, emptiness is challenging and it may be a lack, but it is not always a liability. There is so much value to being able to make space. And this making space requires an attitude of acceptance, to accept this emptiness. And acceptance here does not mean resignation or passivity or helplessness. Acceptance here does not mean, oh, I can't do anything anymore and I just have to accept my lot. Rather, acceptance here has something more to do with willingness. And the willingness to make space and to acknowledge what is. Perhaps to explain this a little more vividly, we can do some kind of exercise. And again, I've used this several times. But just allow yourself to enter into this metaphor of what willingness is. So I invite you to cup your hands in front of you. And as you hold your hands in such a manner before you, imagine that you are holding there a feather, a piece of feather. Imagine what it feels like to hold a feather. Hold it gently, tenderly. Sense yourself trying not to bend it, trying not to fold it. Just sense how a feather can sit there, being held in your hands. And now I invite you to imagine, instead of a feather, imagine holding a cactus in your hands. How does it feel to hold a cactus? And how different is it to hold a cactus? And notice that even if it's more challenging perhaps than a feather, you can still hold the cactus with as much gentleness and tenderness as holding a feather. So perhaps you can consider that. What was that like for you to hold the cactus in your hands? That is what we mean by willingness. That is what we mean when we say we make space for whatever comes up. Our experience may be light and pleasant, and so it's something that we can hold with easy willingness. Or our experience can be painful, prickly, something that hurts us deeply. And yet, we can still choose to hold it with as much gentleness and tenderness. And so, as we regard this experience of emptiness, perhaps we are also invited to accept with as much gentleness and openness. And this ability to accept and make space also allows for something to unfold. And going back to the gospel passage, in the emptiness of the tomb, the women received a revelation and an assurance. So perhaps if we stay long enough with the emptiness, many times we find there's something that is revealed to us, an assurance of something deeper, of a bigger reality that will unfold. And so as we sense this invitation to accept the emptiness, it is also an invitation to allow something to unfold, something to be revealed. And once again, let us pause for some reflection. Perhaps we can ask, in what areas of life do you experience emptiness? How are you invited to make space and practice willingness in these areas? And as you regard this emptiness, do you sense an invitation to allow a revelation to unfold? How so? The third invitation of the empty tomb is attend to what is alive. Why do you seek the living among the dead? This question from the messengers in our gospel account is a wake-up call for the women who were somehow stuck in their grief, in their disbelief, and in their shock. And as we reflect on this today, this may also be a wake-up call for us. How often do we search for life among things that are inert, among things that cannot give life? Perhaps these are things that are here today and gone tomorrow, things that pass away. There are many things in life that may seem to promise happiness, fun, and fulfillment. But in the end, they do not really grant what matters. They are not truly life-giving. The world is full of such things. We can get easily distracted and allured. And this may be your experience now. And life seems to be very enjoyable with all of these things. And perhaps that is something that we have learned over time to just settle with. That we seem to be enjoying. We seem to be enjoying life. But are we really experiencing life? Are we really alive? Are we experiencing something that is truly and ultimately life-giving? Why do you seek the living among the dead? This question also frees us from the temptation to look back, to be stuck on what has already gone, on what was yesterday. Perhaps you may ask, but Father, isn't memory important, especially if we are grieving and um remembering the loss and we are trying to keep alive the memory of our loved one? Is there something wrong with that? Yes, that is part of grieving, but the way we memory um, can be life-giving. And it's not so much that we are stuck in the past. Remembering the memory is here, now, in the present. And we cannot remember and live our life as if we were still in the past, but we remember and make present the memory now. If remembering the memory of who or what we lost prevents us from living fully in the present, then that memory may not be life-giving for us. That memory is no longer a blessing, but a curse. Remembering what we lost or remembering our dearly departed ought to lead us to a new bond with them, something that remains alive. And so remembering isn't just keeping us stuck in what is dead, but remembering opens us up to a new way of being connected, to a new way of being bonded with the ones we lost. And it allows us to keep them alive in a way that honors their impact and their legacy. So why do you seek the living among the dead? This also reminds us that God is not a God of the dead, but of the living. He is constantly life-giving for us. He renews us. And so the invitation of Easter is really to attend to what is alive in our life. We cannot be stuck among what is not life-giving anymore for us. And even in the midst of the pain of our loss, we are still constantly invited to attend to what is alive. And for people whom I have accompanied through a process of grieving, the healthiest form of grieving is always the movement between a loss orientation and a restoration orientation. It is always moving from focusing on what you've lost and also looking for ways to move forward. And there is that abiding invitation to attend to what remains alive in you. And so perhaps we can once again pause here and allow ourselves to reflect on how we continue to seek the living among the dead things in our life and in the world. Perhaps this is something that we experience, and perhaps we sense that we are stuck in seeking the living among the dead. And so perhaps we can also reflect on what signs of new life do we notice in ourselves and in the world around us. This is a time to attend to these signs of new life. Maybe the Lord is inviting us to notice, to pay attention to these signs of new life. And how can we better attend to this newness and even to foster this newness in our life? The fourth invitation of the empty tomb is announce hope. We said that Easter begins with the empty tomb. And it shows us that Easter does not deny the reality of disappointment, pain, and death. But Easter does not end there. The emptiness of the tomb is only a prelude to the fullness of life, signaled by the resurrection of the Lord. And this is ultimately what sparks hope in us and for us. So what is hope? Hope is not naive or a passive kind of optimism. Hope is not something like you just wait there and allow things, good things will happen. And hope is really anchored on vision and motivation. Hope is the heart and mind opening up to new and unexpected possibilities. I love this quote from a writer who really um, writes a lot about hope, Rebecca Solnit. And she says that hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. The mystery of Easter reveals to us that what we experience and what we think as emptiness is really the spaciousness of uncertainty. That emptiness is not like futile or inert or meaningless, because that emptiness is a spaciousness of uncertainty. And in the midst of that uncertainty, we are not helpless. So this really also reminds us that hope does not cancel out uncertainty. Also allows us to act in the midst of that uncertainty. But we are not helpless in the middle of that uncertainty. We are not helpless because God Himself is our help. Easter reminds us that God's ways are greater and far more mysterious than our human minds can fathom. And Easter reminds us that God is always at work, even in moments that we cannot sense or understand. Easter reminds us that God is constantly renewing life for the entire creation in ways that we cannot fully grasp. Behold, I am making all things new, as the passage from Revelation reminds us. And this is something that is worth reflecting on, especially when we are in the middle of so much uncertainty. As I've said at the beginning, that we are always uncomfortable when we are not in control. And we want to be the ones to kind of call the shots. And so if we are wired that way, moments of uncertainty can really be painful, unnerving. But this awareness that God is at work, even in moments that feel to us as if nothing is happening, that perspective fills us with energy and inspiration. Because that is hope. And hope galvanizes us to act. And part of our action is to share, to announce this hope to others. From the gospel, we read this passage from the gospel account of the resurrection. It says, they remembered His words. Then they returned from the tomb and announced all these things to the 11 and to all the others. So when we experience something like this, it's something that unfolds in the midst of darkness and uncertainty and emptiness. When we experience Easter in this way, it is something that we instinctively want to share. It is like hearing a great story or eating a delicious dessert, and we just have to talk about it. And when we experience something deeply profound and something that really changes us, we cannot but share and talk to others about this. We are spreading this experience of hope with others. And the wonder of this is by grounding ourselves in this and by becoming channels of this for others, we also increase hope in ourselves. And so we only need to show up with hope. This quote from Anne Lamott, this writer, also captures that very um, vividly for us. By showing up with hope to help others, I'm guaranteed that hope is present. Then my hope increases. By creating hope for others, I end up awash in the stuff. So perhaps in this invitation of the empty tomb, as this wondrous thing that we cannot fully understand yet starts to unfold and starts to fill us up with this sense of new things, of new life, of possibility um, in our life, then this is something that we can bring to others. This is something that we can also announce and share with others. Announcing hope is sharing hope. And as we share this hope with others, we also sustain our own hope. And so, as we walk through this journey, so we've started by approaching this place of pain, and then we attend to the emptiness, we seek for what is alive, and then we announce that hope to others. Perhaps we can reflect really on who or what have been channels of hope for us. How have they inspired and empowered us? Perhaps we can recall and also give thanks to God for them. And perhaps at this point in your life, you have experienced this. How are you invited to show up with hope? Or even announce hope? And if this is an invitation that you sense, what is your response? So with that, dear friends, we come to the end of our reflection points for this third day of the Holy Triduum Retreat. And perhaps you can spend the rest of the reflection time and even the rest of the day reflecting on these Easter invitations of the empty tomb. Approach the place of pain, accept the emptiness, attend to what is alive, announce hope. As you consider these four invitations of the empty tomb, there's no need to feel any pressure to go through all four. What is important is that you stay with wherever you are and wherever you are moved or whatever has struck you during this time of reflection. And now I invite you to spend the next 30 minutes in front of the empty tabernacle, a visual representation of the empty tomb. And as you spend some time here, just dialogue with the Lord and allow the Lord to speak to you and to lead you and to inspire you. And hopefully during this next half hour, you will truly sense the Easter invitations of the empty tomb.
There's an empty space in your distant gaze, and you may look away, the void still stays. There's a hollow part in your weary heart, and though you try again, no smile can hide your pain. Fear not the night within, that's where my light begins. So you may one day see my face. Only I can fill your days. There's a raging storm in your broken soul, and how you wish away your troubled days. There's an open door at your deepest core, and though you lose your way, you'll still come home someday. Fear not the noise within, that's where my voice begins. So you may one day hear my song. Only I can still your storms. There's an empty room, there's a hidden wound, this heart that burns for you, if only you knew. You're the missing part in my yearning heart, and I will stay around until the day you're found. May this my whispered song lead you to come back home, till we're no longer far apart. Then will your laughter fill my heart.
Thank you, Father Jordan Orbe, for guiding us in our prayerful reflection on Holy Saturday. A friendly reminder for those who are on Zoom, please stay for the breakout rooms. Let me take this opportunity now to thank you all for coming to this online Holy Week retreat. We thank our three speakers, my brother Jesuits, Father Francis Alvarez, Father Arnel Aquino, and Father Jordan Orbe, for offering us helpful points for prayer. We thank our volunteer guides for facilitating the spiritual conversations on Zoom. We thank you for your donations for our ministry and outreach, and for helping spread the word about this retreat, as well as the work we do at the Center for Ignatian Spirituality, Philippines. Special shout out to our CIS online Holy Week retreat team for working generously on this labor of love. This afternoon at 3 o'clock, we will have a replay of the online prayer concert of Imiges Rita, Thy Love and Thy Grace. If you are free, watch it on the Facebook pages of Center for Ignatian Spirituality or Jesuit Communications. Be one with us in CIS Philippines in our mission to offer spiritual accompaniment and nourishment, and in our desire to make our Lord a little more known, a little more loved by all. This is Father Save Olin of CIS Philippines. I hope to see you again in next year's online Holy Week retreat. May our good Lord bless us all.
Good morning once again. Our prayer and reflection for today will continue as we hold the spiritual conversation. Just a few reminders. For any technical problem, please come back to the main room. We will attend to you the soonest. So we will just relax and be still. Everything will be okay. So just go back to the main room.